You're not executing a murderer. You're executing a woman who spent every day since that night trying to undo her sins.
On the cold evening of February 2nd, 1998, Alan Polunsky, chairman of the Texas Board of Criminal Justice, sat on a freezing concrete floor outside a tiny cell. Through the bars, his eyes locked with Karla Faye Tucker, a woman once condemned as a remorseless killer. Despite the horrors of her crimes, Polunsky refused a chair, insisting he didn't want to talk down to her. That night, Karla seemed unusually upbeat, even hopeful. Speaking candidly, she handed Polunsky a 3-page letter advocating for prison reforms, programs to help inmates rebuild their lives, paid labor to ease taxpayer burdens, and systems to foster accountability both inside and beyond prison walls. She spoke of a future she herself would never see, because in less than 24 hours, she was scheduled to die. Earlier that day, she had been flown 160 miles aboard a state aircraft from the Mountain View unit in Gatesville to the Huntsville unit, Texas's oldest prison and home to the state's infamous execution chamber. As the prison doors locked behind her, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles was casting its final votes. 16 members against clemency, 2 abstained, as if silence might somehow weigh lighter on a conscience. Karla had spent years seeking redemption for the gruesome double murder she committed in a drug-fueled haze, swinging a pickaxe during a burglary gone nightmarishly wrong. By many accounts, she found it, but redemption could not stop the clock. It ticked, unrelenting, toward its inevitable conclusion.
If redemption means anything, why am I still going to die for a crime I'd never commit again?
After a restless night, the morning of her execution on February 3rd was unremarkable in its routine. Karla Faye Tucker skipped breakfast, breaking her fast only when her husband, Dana Brown, urged her to eat a few crackers and drink some soda during her final family visit. Brown, a prison preacher who had played a pivotal role in her conversion to Christianity, had married her by proxy in 1995. Now, in her final hours, he could only see her from behind a pane of glass. Tucker had been fasting for days as a quiet act of defiance, devotion, or both. Her last meeting, 4 emotional hours with her husband, father, and sister, ended at noon. She remained fairly upbeat until the time her visit ended. A prison spokesman noted, though he described the farewell as heart-wrenching. For a woman hours away from death, holding on to hope felt like its own rebellion. Shortly after 1 p.m., Karla Faye Tucker was moved from her regular cell to a holding cell just steps away from the execution chamber. Although the distance was short, she was transported by a small armored van, adhering to the Huntsville unit's heightened security protocols. There, her final meal awaited her: a banana, a peach, and a tossed salad with ranch dressing. She had chosen simplicity, her appetite diminished after days of fasting, an intentional act of devotion and penitence in the lead-up to her execution. As the hours passed, those present described Tucker as calm and composed. Prison officials remarked that her demeanor remained steady and resolute, even as the clock inched closer to her final moments. Staying true to this composure, she declined a sedative, determined to face her end with complete clarity. To pass the time, she wrote letters, final messages that were anything but ordinary, filled with faith, reflection, and heartfelt pleas for forgiveness. Her words were intended to outlive her, offering a glimpse of the woman she had become.
I know people want me to be a monster, but what if the monster you're looking for doesn't exist anymore?
Cheryl Archer, the women's staff chaplain and Karla's friend, arrived at her holding cell shortly after 3:30 p.m. The narrow corridors and towering cement walls felt suffocating, but Cheryl's focus remained steady. This was her final visit with a dear friend. As Cheryl approached, Karla stood behind the locked door, smiling softly. The 2 women sat down on the floor and held hands through the bars. Both struggled to hold back tears. Finally, Cheryl reached into her pocket and retrieved a rose-bordered note from Karla's attorney, David Botsford. David gave me this on the way, she said quietly, unfolding the paper and reading aloud. Karla, the Fifth Circuit denied at 2:45. Last chance in Supreme Court hearing in Austin is ongoing to declare board's votes illegal to force reprieve. Al Gonzalez called from governor's office. He will call again. I love you and will be with you in heart, spirit, and the Lord. With all legal avenues exhausted, Governor George W. Bush confirmed that the execution would proceed as scheduled. Her case has been thoroughly reviewed, he stated, adding, judgments about the heart and soul of an individual on death row are best left to a higher authority. Over the years, Karla had fiercely fought her sentence. Since 1984, she had blamed drugs for her actions and claimed the system had failed her, arguing she had received ineffective counsel, that the jury had been improperly instructed, and that she was denied a fair trial.
They say I deserve to die, but tell me, how many of you would still be alive if God judged you the way Texas judges me?
Yet, after years of resistance, she had finally found strength and acceptance. She lowered her gaze for a moment, then lifted her head. Smiling softly, she said, "You know, I'm at peace with this, Cheryl. Make sure the women don't hold this against the system. Tell them to forgive."
I don't fear dying. What I fear is a world that can't see the difference between justice and revenge.
Sometime after 6:20 p.m., Karla, freshly showered and dressed in white prison clothes, climbed onto the gurney without assistance. Her hair still wet, she was strapped securely across her legs and body, her arms fastened to sideboards. A catheter was inserted into the veins of each arm, preparing her for what came next. Lord Jesus, help them find my vein, Karla murmured as the catheter was inserted. Strapped to the table, she turned toward the small window and asked, "Can Warden Baggett hear me?" When assured he could, she began, "I want to say to all of you, the Thornton family and Jerry Dean's family, I am so sorry. I hope God gives you peace with this." Her voice softened as she spoke to her husband. "Baby, I love you. Everyone has been so good to me. I love you all so much. I'm going to be face to face with Jesus now." She paused, then added, "Warden Baggett, thank you. You've been so good to me. I love you all very much. I'll see you when you get there. I'll wait for you." Karla had selected 4 individuals to witness her execution. Her sister, Carrie Weeks, her husband, Dana Brown, her close friend, Jackie Onken, and Ronald Carlson, the brother of one of her victims, Deborah Thornton. Despite his loss, he had come to believe in Karla's change and was a vocal opponent of the death penalty. Meanwhile, in a separate room, Richard Thornton, Deborah's husband, along with Deborah's son and stepdaughter, watched the execution unfold. Richard quietly said, "Here she comes, baby doll. She is all yours," relieved that the moment had finally arrived. Karla then looked at Ronald Carlson, who had been a steadfast supporter in her final years, and softly said, "Ron, give Peggy a hug for me." It was a final expression of affection as she spoke to those who had stood by her side. After her final words, Karla licked her lips and, according to witnesses, began humming softly, waiting calmly for the lethal injection to take effect. The 3 drugs, sodium thiopental, pancuronium bromide, and potassium chloride, began to be injected at 6:37 p.m. Within 2 minutes, the witnesses heard Tucker give 2 deep sighs and then a groan. At 6:45 p.m., Karla Faye Tucker was pronounced dead, with a smile on her face and her eyes still fixed on the ceiling, as if searching for something beyond. What do you think? Does redemption outweigh punishment, or does accountability demand a final reckoning, no matter the change? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more powerful stories.